Hi, my name is Dana Arnett, co-host of Wicked Marketing, along with my partner, Carlos Cepene. You can find more information about us and our business on LinkedIn, or if you have any questions, email us at info@wickedbionic.com. Subscribe to Wicked Marketing on Apple Podcasts and write an awesome review for us. We're also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. Thanks for listening.
I'm Dana.
And I'm Carlos. Thanks for joining us today. So one of the things that has come up in one of our projects recently that I felt strongly, because of where we're at as a society, and we're turning into this much more aware and inclusive place,
Yes.
It would be great to talk about with you guys today, and that is accessibility overall, but in particular in branding. And let's talk a little bit about it. Accessibility relates to the ability for all people to experience something in the same way, right? And so when we're talking about accessibility, think about it this way. We want a person that is deaf, a person that is blind, a person that has color blindness, for example, a person that has a hidden disability or a motor disability, to be able to experience whatever you're presenting to them in the same way as a person that doesn't. Right? So it's a very inclusive mentality. It's like, how do we present stuff in a way that people get that same experience, right? Imagine it like if you were presenting the Coca-Cola logo to someone that is blind, right? That famous Coca-Cola logo, you can envision it in your head just by me saying the word Coca-Cola, right? Someone that is blind can't, because they can't see it, right?
Or an apple or an orange or anything, yes.
Anything, or even the Apple logo, right? So when we talk about branding, in this case in particular, we're going to focus on logo development, right? And presenting that part of your brand and overall brand look. So we've been doing branding for many, many years and created many, many brands in the past, both in our corporate lives and now as an agency. And we're currently working with, we obviously can't say the name because of NDAs and stuff, but probably one of the biggest, not probably, for sure, because I saw an article recently that talked about the most loved brands in the world, and it is one of the top 10 most loved brands across the board.
How lucky are we?
We're working on branding for them, developing brands for them. And one of the things that we pride ourselves in is in the fact that we are a multicultural agency. And multicultural doesn't only mean multi-ethnic or multiracial or anything like that, right? It's
diversity.
It's diversity. It's everybody, right? Like to me, a yoga mom is a culture, right? That's a culture. It's a culture. It's a mindset. It's a specific way of thinking.
Let's say internally as an agency, we are diverse, right? We
are
a diverse agency in cultures and ages and generations and
ages, generations, income levels, anything like that, right? Is multicultural.
And that's why we call ourselves. That's what we do for people.
And part of being multicultural, right, or culturally relevant marketing, that's our tagline, is focusing on reaching everyone, right? That's the idea at the end of the day, that you want to reach people, right? And the reason why multicultural matters is because of people's experiences and their beliefs, they receive and engage with information differently, right? So one of the things that we say often is older Hispanics prefer to receive information in Spanish. Younger Hispanics prefer to receive information in English. Older Hispanics care a lot about the future of our children. Younger Hispanics care more about their own situation. Right? So like things like that are cultural. They're based on their age group. They're based on their income level. So when we start talking about accessibility, then that's another culture too, right? If you want people to be able to receive a message in a way that they can engage with it, right? Then you have to deliver it in a way that they can experience it, that they can feel it, that they can have a feeling about it, right? And that's what I think was missing overall in how branding was developed in my previous experience. And it is something that we're bringing now to the table. And we kind of want to share so that when you're developing your brand, or developing your brand for accessibility, right? Yeah. You think about these things. So let's start with the simpler ones, just to trigger some thoughts on people. When you develop a logo, right? You usually develop something that represents your brand, that has a meaning, that has your voice, that represents what you stand for, that tells a story a little bit about who you are, right? Or you use a tagline like we do, right? So our company name is Wicked Bionic, which doesn't tell you marketing, right? But it tells you that we are creative, that we are bionic, meaning in like the way that we do things. Yeah, the way that we do things is different than other people, right? We really focus on doing things that are innovative and shifting the narrative and creating perceptions and stuff like that, right? But then our tagline tells you what we do, culturally relevant marketing, right? So like I was saying before, all of that innovation and all of that creativity and everything that we do is created and delivered in a way that is relevant based on each culture. And that's sort of who we are, and that's our company, right? So when you're developing that brand and you're developing your logo, whether you spend $5 on Fiverr to get a logo, which some people do, or you're spending, tens of thousands of dollars in getting a real logo created with a whole brand deck and playbook and a style sheet and all of that kind of stuff, right? One thing that tends to be forgotten is that there are all these cultures, right? And that there are, and we've talked about this in the past, right? Branding even at your campaign level, right? So we've talked about the Kmart experience in the past where their agency tried to create this brand for a campaign within Kmart that was called Mama Stay, because it was targeted towards yoga moms, right? So mamas and Mama Stay, and then they failed to realize that their biggest mother audience was Hispanic mothers, and Mama Stay in Spanish means suck it, right? So that's culturally relevant, right? Like being aware of those things is culturally relevant. Now, when you're talking about accessibility, it is more of a construct of your brand, right? When you're constructing your brand, when you look at the elements of your brand, are they accessible? So let's talk about the basic ones, right? When you develop a brand, the logo for your brand needs to be high contrast, right? So that people that have limited vision are able to see the logo, are able to see the details of the logo. So as much as possible, there should be a level of high contrast, right? Your logo should never be layered on top of a color that if you have low visibility, it blends in, right? Because those people will not be able to see your logo, right? So those are things that kind of make sense, right? It should be high contrast. You should be able to layer it on top of or create rules at least around where your logo can be layered on top of, right? So that people can see it, they can experience it, right? That's basic kind of stuff. Now think about it a different way. What if it's a person that is colorblind, right? Did you know that there are actually more than 6 different types of color blindness, but there's 3 main ones that are sort of like the
universal.
Well, not so much the universal as sort of like the more extreme ones, right? The ones that really shift the color that people are seeing. And you'd be surprised how colorblind people see the world. Like, I was blown away when I started doing this kind of stuff.
Color wheel was something, yes.
In that there's certain colors that they just can't see. So imagine like replacing the colors on your logo for brown, right? They see it all brown. I'm like, oh my God, they're not experiencing, and that's the key word, they're not experiencing my brand. They're not able to see it in the way that everybody else sees it. So are you being conscious about developing your brand? And I'm not saying that you limit your brand to being a single color. Absolutely not. But for example, one of the brands that we were building had several colors. Think about it like, like rainbow type, right? Like 10 different colors in there. That because it represented different pieces of a whole, right? And when we ran it through the colorblind filter, what we realized is certain colors next to another color give you the perception of the same color.
It blends, yep.
So if your brand is all about saying in what this color wheel or whatever you want to call it is saying to people is that these are multiple parts of a whole, right? These are all these colors represent all the different parts of a whole. If to a colorblind person, they don't see all those colors, they actually just see one color or 2 colors in there, your story's lost.
Right.
To them.
You can't speak to all those colors and the representation of them. Yes.
Yeah. So by switching some of the tonality of some of the colors, like making the red a specific red, making the yellow a specific yellow, making the orange a specific orange, right? Like moving the needle a little bit. The perceived effect to people that are not colorblind was minimal. Right? It was still a color wheel. It was still like all these colors. It was still those colors. It was just a different tonality of those colors. But to the colorblind, it made a huge difference.
Right.
Because you went from seeing,
inclusive.
Yeah, you went from seeing sort of a pie to seeing a full color spectrum.
Yeah.
Right.
If you were going to say, Carlos, I was going to just ask you for our listeners, a place where a resource where they could go and find that color wheel or the way to layer it over. Where could they go? Yeah, so there's multiple ways to do it, and you don't have to be scared by it, right? You don't have to be this super knowledgeable graphic designer to do it, right? So on the spectrum of like general people that are owners of businesses that just want to check out their brand. There are several apps on the App Store that are free, that are apps for you to look at images through the eyes of daltonism, right? And so you download the app and you literally open the app and point it at the screen at your logo or at a paper that has your logo or something, and it'll have the options. There's 3 main types of daltonism in there that you can look at. They're called Deuteronomy. I forget the names of them, but they're in there. They'll be in the app, and there's literally, if you just search the App Store for colorblind apps, you will find those, and they're free. And you download them, yes. Point them at the screen. Now, for those that are more in the graphic design space or that have a graphic design team, the great thing that I noticed recently, actually, about tools like Photoshop is that Photoshop has a filter for each type of daltonism. So if you have Photoshop, you can look under the filters for the daltonism filters, and it will literally show you the logo that you're designing how it will look to people that are colorblind.
Good for Photoshop. We love that about them.
Yeah, and Photoshop is a very common tool in design, and even for people that don't do design.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's a consumer-facing type tool. So this is something, for you to be aware of, right? And it is very important for you to be aware about these things, because even though we may be a polarized society right now, we have more and more been moving towards a place where society is very much aware of everybody else.
Well, and what space do we occupy? We occupy that space where we work with diversity and inclusion departments at companies or at places like WeBank West or, many different, and that is all about diversity and inclusion. So it's there. What the country looks like is what the country looks like, whatever,
Yeah.
shift and change. Yeah. But we live in this space, so it's so important as more people get on board and we get smarter and, companies get smarter. We can share this stuff and it makes all the difference in the world, I think, to be able to, if we love the idea of like that feeling of inclusion, like it's become so important to us as we've developed, so it does matter. Maybe you pick one more, Carlos, that we could share.
Well, and at the very simplest level, right? You want people to love your brand as much as you do, right? That's why you spend this time and effort in developing your brand, and that people experience your brand because your brand represents who you are in the market. So we'll do one last one, just as a simple one. Accessibility is becoming a big deal on the web in particular. Making sites accessible at a corporate level in particular has become very important, not only from making your website accessible and your brand accessible, but from a legal standpoint, because there's been many ADA lawsuits now against websites for lack of accessibility. So when you're developing a brand, I guess this final example would be, how is that brand going to be perceived by someone that is blind? Right? So when someone is blind, they still navigate the web. Don't think they don't. They navigate the web. And there are tools that are built into browsers like Chrome and Firefox and Safari and Internet Explorer, whatever it's called now, Microsoft Edge, that read the web to people, right? So when you're developing your brand or developing your logo, not only should you develop the visual logo, but you should develop the interpretive logo, right? So if you're developing a logo, you would write out how you want that logo to be perceived, right? So in the case of our logo, Wicked Bionic, right? The interpretation of that would be the logo of our company, it spells out the words Wicked Bionic. It is layered on top a splash of paint. The paint is supposed to represent the creativity that exists within our agency. Below the logo, our tagline is spelled out: culturally relevant marketing. The focus of our organization is to reach people of multiple cultures. We felt strongly that this was a great positioning. Period.
And then they get a visual, because you can get it. If I closed my eyes, I would have had a visual in my head. I wouldn't have gotten the detail, but I would have gotten a visual and a feeling attached to that.
And that's the point, right? That you, by looking at our logo, get a feeling that we want you to get immediately, right? Like this creative look, splash, at the multiple colors that are supposed to represent the I can't say that word, plurality of society, right? But you kind of get that by looking at it. But if you're blind, you don't.
Nothing. You don't.
So that's why it's important for people to be able to, and the way that I said it may not be the exact representation, but it is the representation that we want. So you get that feeling. Right. The feeling and the emotion is what creates the connection to the brand.
Love it. Those are just two of so many, but it's such a beautiful thing to see. I was thinking about, remember that when the days came when you would at the ATM and you had the Braille, and you're like, what is that for those of us, that are fortunate enough to be sighted? And hearing accessibility within the digital world is such a beautiful thing. And I'm so glad that we get to be a part of that. So that's a couple, but I'm sure that if you Google accessibility, certainly in digital, Carlos, or what, in
web?
Yeah, accessibility and digital, accessibility and branding, or hire an agency like us.
Or hire an agency like us. wickedbionic.com.
Yeah.
At wickedbionic.com. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was interesting for everybody. It's certainly always interesting for us to talk about. And we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe to and share Wicked Marketing on Apple Podcasts and write an awesome review for us. We are also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. See you next time.